Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Holovatenko, and today we are going to talk about how to help your students develop resilience and overcome the impact of traumatic events. We're going to explore the idea of trauma-informed English language teaching technology in primary school. You will learn a step-by-step algorithm that will help you implement this technology from the very next lesson. Are you ready? Let's start. So first, let's define what a trauma is. According to the research, the trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, natural disaster, war, etc. And research has shown that trauma affects children quite a lot. Immediately after the event, there is shock, denial, and these are typical responses. The longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, some flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. The development of children and adolescents who have been exposed to trauma compared to those who haven't is different. Children and adolescents without traumatic exposure can achieve survival and emotional behavioral control, allowing them to flourish and succeed socially, emotionally, and cognitively. However, children and adolescents exposed to trauma find it challenging to achieve at school due to the heightened states of arousal and real or perceived concerns about their safety and security. This is what is shown on the slide. However, let's think about what makes trauma trauma. And psychologists say that trauma is not just events that happened in the past, but this is how the person sees those events. So this personal experience, and then it leads to the results of trauma, some outcomes. So, for example, for one person, the loss of a cat can be a traumatic event. However, to the other person, the loss of a cat will never ever become a traumatic event. Psychologists also say that every person has some history of traumas. That is why we as teachers and educators have to adapt the teaching process towards the needs of these people all over our classrooms. First, we have to be prepared to unexpected reactions, which are results of trauma. And you might think, what triggers those events? Most common triggers might be a perceived loss of control between those who were exposed to trauma. It can also be anxiety around changes in routine and their usual way of life. The next trigger might be a fear of disappointing or upsetting others, especially the close circle of students, their family, or those adults who are quite important in their life. The next trigger might be unexpected events, sounds, sights, and activities. And it might trigger some memories or unpredicted reactions. Knowing these triggers, we as teachers can adapt the educational process to avoid those. Consistent research has shown that there are following principles of trauma-informed teaching. This is first to create a safe environment. Next, we build relationships with the students and parents and larger community, which is completely aligned with the ideas of social emotional learning. Next principle is respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The next principle is supportive teaching practices and sense of community. Now we are going to have a look at these principles in more details. And the first principle is to create a safe environment. If we are teaching online, the safe environment, which is in our area of responsibility, is the cybersecurity first and foremost. We should talk about the cameras being on or off with students. Also, we should create those meeting codes and passwords and protect these meetings with all the cyber security measures. So, for example, we don't allow strangers. All students should have their real names written in the bottom of their videos. And they do not share these meetings with other people. And also you can enable the waiting room if you use, for example, Zoom, or if you use Google Meet for education, you can enable just like knock in the door, like people ask to join your meeting. This way, you know that no strangers come to your meetings. The next element of cybersecurity is the code of conduct. And this is something most probably you have already discussed with your students, having experience of teaching online. However, some things should be added to this code of conduct because of the air raid sirens in their area and some unexpected sounds that they might hear. Then the next thing you should also discuss are their expectations. Expectations might be regarding the microphone being on or off, then camera being on or off, and when it should be on and off. And also taking screenshots of your meeting so that it doesn't become viral memes or whatever students might want to make. And in this way, you know that the meetings, the classes you organize are cyber secure. And as we say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So whatever students say, it stays there during the meeting, and they do not share any other information with others. Also, quite important thing is to discuss virtual backgrounds. Some students like changing those quite a lot. And you might want to discuss how many times they might change their virtual backgrounds during the class and for what reason. And also you can discuss what's appropriate virtual background is and what's not, so that these backgrounds do not trigger other students in your classes. The next element of the safe environment is classroom security if you're in brick and mortar classrooms. And first and foremost, there should be some countdown areas. When students feel that they are triggered, they need some timeout from your class, and they are overwhelmed with emotions and feelings, so that they can't control them. You might have some area where they quietly stay alone for a minute or two, or discuss something with psychological support or teacher helper, or just read a book. So change the activity for a while and then go back when they are in emotionally stable way. And then the next important thing is also knowing where shelters are and knowing those clear instructions, step-by-step guidance, what to do when the air raid siren goes on. So this is the first principle of creating safe environment. The next principle is building relationships. And we are talking about relationships not only with the students, but between students and between teachers and wider community involving parents as well. So some of the tips how you can build these relationships are to ask questions. And English is, I think, one of the best subjects to discuss lots of different things in English. So you can ask lots of things about their hobbies, about their week, about their day, about their routines, and etc. Also, while you're waiting for the class to join your online meeting or come to the class in brick and mortar campus, so you can have the small talk with students to identify what they feel now, what happened in their life, maybe discuss some important issues, and then just joke and build these relationships, not like a teacher-student relationship, but like equal persons. And then the next one is be sincerely interested in their life. Don't ask questions just to ask questions, but try your best to understand what they feel and what's going on in their life and what kind of support they might need. The next thing is empower them by choices. For example, you can see the picture, like how do you want to be greeted today? This can be adapted to online and offline learning. So let your students choose what they want to do next. Let your students choose how they want to do some activities. And this way they will know that there's something in their control that will help them feel secure and cherished in your classroom. The next one is work in breakout rooms. First and foremost, if you teach online, that's a very good idea to open those breakout rooms and let your students talk to each other while you monitor their activities. If you work offline, this is group work, and let your students share their concerns in their discussions. And this way, they will build social skills and also they will share their experiences. And the next thing is reach parents and be that helping hand if they want to discuss the things going on with their children. So your knowledge might be this helping hands for your parents, for the parents and children in your classroom. The next principle is respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We show this respect and diversity when we respect homework environment of our students. So if they don't want to show their homework environment, probably this is a good idea to encourage them using different backgrounds if you teach online. If you teach online and you can see someone going around them, just be patient and respect that not all of them have space where to study. Some of them might have classes from really unexpected places. Just do respect that. The next is calibrate the workload thoughtfully in terms of the workload and having no electricity, constant blackouts, poor internet connection. A good idea is to reach students and their parents and discuss how you can help them and pretend this helplessness so that you elicit their answers. And if they give you this answer, they kind of like promise you to stick to something they suggested. So this will be a very good idea how you calibrate the workload for your students. The next thing is use universal design in your handouts. If we are talking about universal design, so your handouts are accessible, they are usable and reusable, and they are inclusive. So for some students, it's a very good idea to have some slides for your class before the actual class. For some of them, it might be a good idea to watch the video recording of your class, so that because they don't have good internet connection, for example, and then they can catch up with the material you discussed. Also, it's a good idea to have these handouts not only as presentation, but as files that you can share with them so that they can take notes and write in those slides or files. And the next one is provide video recordings for those students who might have missed something, or their learning style is more of audio and visual, and they can go back to those videos and recall the material. The next principle is supportive teaching practices. First and foremost, we practice patience and compassion with the students, try to be as understanding as possible. And we encourage students choosing their level of challenge. And we explicitly can give them 2 or 3 levels of challenge and ask them to choose whichever they find comfortable with. So if they've chosen level 1, then they might want to proceed to level 2 after that, or they might want to stick to level 1 only. So this is the way you can individualize the learning process for them, and also you do not trigger them by those over difficult tasks. However, at the same time, we should remember about the Stephen Krashen's idea of I+1 difficulty. So even level 1 should have some difficulties for students, but those difficulties will be good for them in terms of encouraging working more and not just doing things to get some mark or appraisal, and they know this material. So I+1 idea should still be in all the levels you suggest to students. The next thing how we can support them is encourage them to choose their level of challenge and individualizing their learning goals. So we add this idea of individualization, and this helps students track their progress and success in terms of their goals, and it helps you to build realistic expectations from students, as well as finding this medium between students' level of challenge they work with and the overall learning goals of the curriculum and the situation in the country when they might experience anxiety and frustration about everything going on around. The next principle is the sense of community. And in terms of teaching trauma-informed learning, you should double down on communication and outreach with parents, students, and larger community, so that students understand that they are not left alone. They have someone to help them with, and they do not struggle there alone. And also, this next step might be maintaining rituals and routines like usual announcement or weekly newsletters or some informations you share. And by these actions, you show that you do care about your students and you give them this piece of normality in this unusual world for them. And now, after these principles, I wanted to have a look at different techniques that we can use to implement in English classrooms and help our students feel cherished, secure, and empowered. So these techniques are, so the grounding technique means switching attention of your students from things that trigger them to things that are around them, their feelings, their the smells they feel, so things that are closely related to them right now. And by switching attention, you can avoid the conflict and also help students calm down. For example, you can ask them to take a deep breath and name 5 objects around them. If they are in the classroom, they have already learned the school objects, and if they are online, they might revise some of the vocabulary, like the room, the housing, vocabulary. If their level of English is not enough to do this activity, you can scaffold it by step by step for them. You can ask them to draw these things, and you can also use the translanguaging technique, and that's okay if you give them chance to use their mother tongue and you translate it into English, and this way they might learn new words for them, but at the same time you still communicate. You communicate and you fulfill the goal of that communication. The next technique is contextualizing emotions. And whenever you see that your group is triggered or might be triggered, you can ask them to stop and think how they feel. And if they haven't learned this vocabulary, you can provide them some pictures, and then those pictures with smiley faces, they will help them identify some unknown vocabulary. You can scaffold it step by step this way. Also, you can ask them what color symbol shows that emotion, and this way they will revise other vocabulary, and then they will contextualize what they feel and what's around them. So instead of just focusing on the attention, they will switch to some colors, symbols of that emotion. So they do admit this emotion. After that, you can keep working on calming them down within your classroom. The next technique is embodiment. You can start your class with asking how they feel, and you can ask them to mime that emotion. And most probably you have some dialogue or comic strips in your books. You can ask them to role play that with focus on different emotions. So first, they learn the vocabulary regarding emotions. Second, they practice recognizing those emotions in others. So this is their first step to understanding others. They also mime those emotions, so they think how they show these emotions and what message is communicated to others. And this way, by experiencing those emotions, by seeing them in others, their frustration level might fall down. And also be attentive here not to trigger some traumas. Of course, you're not a psychologist, but it's a very good idea to reach out for the help of a psychologist and have a look together at what patterns there might be, and maybe some of the students need help in terms of trauma-informed learning. So you are not alone in this battlefield, and you should reach out for larger community and specialized help from others. But embodiment is one of the techniques that might help start this discussion with students. The next technique is working with fears, and you can discuss students' fears, their anxiety, frustration, things that were not so pleasant for them. You can ask them to write those on slips of paper. At this step, you might need to scaffold this really in a detailed way for students to write those sentences, or if their level is too low for this activity, they can draw it and write only one word in terms of fears. And then you collect those fears, you log them in some box, and whenever they think about some fears, then whenever they feel some negative emotions, they can just write it on the slip of paper and lock it in that box. So this way they can see that that's okay to admit this emotion, but it stays in that box, and I'm getting rid of it. So the message should be like getting rid of those fears and admitting them, and that's okay to do. The next technique is empowerment. And by empowerment, we mean the assigning classroom roles to students. So they might choose the role they want, or you might change those roles from time to time. But knowing that they have a role in the community helps them feel more included in this community and also empowered, because they do change something, and something is in their control. And the next activity that you might try is giving them their zone of responsibility. So, for example, you do a part of things, and then they do a part of things, and then whatever you do is your responsibility as a teacher, and they are helping you in the capacity they can. It can be in terms of their learning. It can be in terms of some classroom things they do. However, this is a very powerful tool to empower students and show that they are a part of community and they can control something around them. All these techniques help create a safe and welcoming environment for your students, and also reduce the level of triggers that you might have within the classrooms. I'm really grateful for your participation in watching this video. Of course, these are not all the sources of activities and techniques and algorithms to implement trauma-informed learning. You can find more of these online, and we can continue this talk. If you would like to continue the discussion and share your own experiences, you can find me in social media, and you can also email me. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.